Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Iowa City Public Library. Thank you very much for coming this evening. We have such a special treat to have a local author who's written this marvelous fantasy series. How many of you have read book 1 and or 2 of the Magic Thief series? Yeah, they're great, aren't they? Has anybody been lucky enough to zip their way through book 3 today? Did you check it out at 10 a.m.? Really? Oh my, well, yeah, some special, some folks with special access have gotten to do that. Well, they'll let you know too. It's been equally as exciting as the other adventures of Con. For those of you who haven't read it yet, you can probably tell from some of the decorations in the room that there's some dragons in book 3. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Sarah Prineas.
The Magic Thief Found. But that's 3 books into the series, so I figured before we get into that I should go back and reintroduce you to book 1, the thing that started it all off, The Magic Thief, which came out in 2008. Now, I saw the show of hands when Andrea asked, so I know a lot of you have read this book already, but maybe it's been a while, so I'll remind you about The Magic Thief. It all takes place in a city that, in its layout, as you know, looks a lot like Iowa City. It's a city with a river running through the middle of it. Unlike Iowa City, however, it has a nice part and a not so nice part. This is the city of Wilmette. On one side of the river is this part of the city called the Sunrise, and that's the nice part of the city. It's where the streets are wide and they're well lit at night, and there are parks and nice houses. On the other side of the river, squeezed in by the river, is the Twilight, which is the dark and dangerous part of the city. It's where the streets are narrow and twisty, and bad guys are lurking on every corner waiting to knock you on the head and steal your money, if you have any. And running through the middle of the city is a river, which thus far has not flooded, but it could one day. And on the islands in the middle of the river are where the Magisters live. The Magisters are the wizards of the city. Now, book 1 begins, you guys remember the line? A thief is a lot like a wizard. Yeah. And the main thief that we meet, first of all, in book 1 is Con. And you know Con. He lives on the Twilight side of the river, on the bad side of town. And he's a gutter boy, and that means he lives by his wits on the streets. He's a lockpick and a pickpocket. So he's a kind of magic thief himself. And one dark night, he picks the pocket of this guy, the wizard Nevery. You can see Nevery here with his knob-headed cane, and you can also see him holding his Locus Magicalicus. Do any of you guys have your Locus Magicalicus on hand? Yeah, this is the magical stone that every wizard needs in order to do magic. If you don't have a Locus Magicalicus, you can't do magic. So you need that locus stone. Nevery has one. At the beginning of book 1, Con does not have a Locus Magicalicus. Oh, I know you guys have one. That's great. Another important character in book 1 and book 2 and book 3 is this guy, Bennett. Tough guy, right? He looks a little bit like Frankenstein, doesn't he? He's a tough guy. He's Nevery's bodyguard, but he's also a guy who knits sweaters and he bakes biscuits. In fact, these are the actual Bennett biscuits that somebody baked. Somebody in England baked these biscuits and took a picture and sent it to me. Supposedly, they're very good. I have never baked Bennett's biscuits myself. I get my biscuits out of a can that says Pillsbury on them. It's very sad. Bennett and Nevery and Con live in this house. It's called Heartsease. And as you guys who have read book 1 already know, Heartsease is kind of a building that's falling apart. It's got a big hole in the middle of it. Do you see the hole in the middle of it? That's because Nevery, the wizard, has a history of using pyrotechnics. In other words, he blows stuff up. And 20 years ago, before the magic thief begins, Nevri blew up this hole in the middle of his house. And because of that, he's been exiled from the city for 20 years. And he returns one dark night, and the first thing that happens to him is this kid picks his pocket and becomes his apprentice, and the adventures begin. During the course of the first book, Khan has to find his locus magicalicus. It's not as easy for him as it was for you guys tonight. And he finds his locus stone, but in the course of his adventures, he loses it. It's destroyed, and it's lost forever. His locus stone. It's the thing that's most precious to him, and he loses it. So we start out book 2, The Magic Thief Lost. Khan, at the beginning of this book, has no locus magicalicus, and he figures the best way that he can do magic is to do pyrotechnics. So this book starts out, a wizard is a lot like a pyrotechnist. And one of the things that happens in this book is that Khan is starting to learn how to be not just a wizard, but also somebody who can blow stuff up if he needs to. His idea is that he can do pyrotechnics, use explosions to talk to the magic instead of having a locus magicalicus. It's a pretty smart idea. However, it's a little bit destructive. The first person that he meets who's a pyrotechnist, a real one, is Ember. Ember, as you can see from his picture, probably not the nicest guy. He's very, very intelligent. He's also an extremely important character, especially in book 3. So you're going to see a lot of Ember in book 3, just so you know. Unfortunately, in book 2, with Khan's experiments in pyrotechnics, he has a little problem with Heartsease. Now, Nevri started it 20 years ago, right, with the hole in the middle of the building? Well, unfortunately, Khan finishes it. He destroys his own home in book 2. And because of that, he has to leave Heartsease. Now, last year, I don't know, who was here last year for the presentation? A bunch of people were here. Well, you guys who weren't here, you really missed something, because last year we did pyrotechnics in this very room. And there's Nova looking very worried about having to light on fire this giant balloon filled with helium gas that then exploded and made a huge noise and knocked that light out of the ceiling. So we were thinking, how are we going to top that public library blowing things up? It was hard to figure out. I don't think we're going to blow anything up this year, though, however. Yeah, sorry, no explosions this year. So anyway, Khan blows up his own house, and because of that, the same thing happens to him that happens to Nevri. Happened to Nevri a long time ago. He's exiled from the city. He has to leave. Exile means you have to go away and never come home again. This is a really tough thing for Khan to deal with. So he goes off, and there's been some danger in the city. There have been these shadows that have been preying on people and injuring people. It's been kind of dangerous. So Khan leaves Welmet, and he goes to the desert city of Desh. He goes with Rowan, and they're trying to find out who sent the shadows to prey on the people of Welmet. While they're there, they meet this guy, Jagus. He's a bad guy. And in the course of the adventures in this book, Khan discovers that everything that happened in book 1, the magic thievery that was going on in book 1, was actually part of an even bigger, more diabolical plan. And there's an even bigger magic and an even bigger danger out there than he suspected when he was having his adventures in book 1. Which takes us to book 3, which is where we are today. Book 3 begins, a wizard is a lot like a thief. There is going to be more magic thievery in this book with our favorite magic thief. Here's Khan. He's looking a little more grown up in this picture, isn't he? He looks a little different than he looked before. What do you guys see him wearing in this picture? Does anybody see? His sweater? Yeah, this is the sweater. This is the black sweater that Bennett knitted for him. It's a funny thing about this picture. When my publisher first sent me this new picture of Khan, he was wearing a little vest and a coat, and he looked like a hobbit. And I said, just no. He needs to look a little bit more like a kid with a black sweater on. So they changed the picture, thank goodness. Another new thing in this book is that Bennett knits Con a scarf. This is a gray scarf. It's gray wool, sort of grayish greenish wool. It has long tassels, and you see the keyhole for pulling the end of the scarf through. This scarf is a really good place to hide your lockpick wires if you have lockpick wires on you. You can also embroider your name in the runes in gold thread if you want to on this scarf. Really cool thing about this, in book 1 and book 2, there were recipes in the back of the book. In book 3, there's a pattern for this scarf. So if you are a knitter, or if somebody you know is a knitter, you can knit this scarf and have Con's keyhole scarf. Lockpick hiding scarf for your very own. So one of the other really, my favorite things about book 3 is the fact that it has dragons in it. And this is one of the dragons in book 3. It's the middle-sized dragon, the flame dragon. And a cool thing about being an author who writes about dragons is that a lot of times I get artwork from my readers. And this is an example of some artwork that I got from a reader. It's kind of cool. A lot of my letters from readers have runes written on them, which I know how to read. This is a picture that my friend Greg made for me, and it's a picture of Con. He looks like he's about to be eaten by a dragon. He doesn't look too worried about it, though. The dragon looks hungry. This next dragon is here with me. This is my dragon, Pip. Shall I show you guys Pip? This is little Pip. Pip is a knitted dragon. Well, it's a crocheted dragon, really, but I like to say knitted because Bennett knits. A friend of mine read book 3 early, and then she got somebody to make this Pip. It's wearing a little necklace that says Pip on it. So that's a really cute one. And the next dragon was actually made by somebody who's in this very room, who made me a dragon when I went to visit her reading group. So that's my favorite dragon, my little dragon there. So before we go to talk more about the dragons in my book, here's some more things that you guys need to know about dragons. They may or may not hatch from eggs. I'm not sure where they come from. The dragons in my books, when they're young, they're very tiny. Very tiny. But they never stop growing. So they grow and they grow until they become extremely large. And one particular thing about the dragons in my book, which is true of many dragons, is that they love stones and precious jewels. One of the dragons in my book has grown so big that it's as big as the top of a mountain. One of them is medium-sized. It's only as big as a house. And the smallest dragon, Pip, the dragon, is about the size of a kitten, but much more fierce. So I'm going to read to you a little piece of the third book. And as you probably can guess, it's a piece with dragons in it, a dragon in it. Now, think back to book 1. I don't know if you guys remember in book 1. There is a part early in book 1 when Con is being nosy, and he's in Nevery's study, and he finds an oil painting. You guys remember that part? He finds a painting, yeah. And he's looking at it. He can't tell what it is. It's covered with grime and soot and cobwebs. And Con says, Nevery, what's this painting? And Nevery says, oh, it's a painting of a dragon. And Con says, what's a dragon? And Nevery says, oh, you are ignorant, boy. And Con's, yes, he's ignorant. But he wants to know, what's a dragon? And Nevery says, a dragon is a form of winged reptile, and it has a spiked crest running down its back and a spiked tail, and it's known to spit fire. And dragons are extinct, boy. You will never see a dragon. That's what Nevery says. Well, this is the part of book 3 that shows that Nevery was wrong. Earlier in the book, Con has this great idea. He does a finding spell. and he's going to he does a pyrotechnic finding spell, and it's going to point his way to where his locus magicalicus is. And so he does the spell, and the spell burns a line out into the world, out of Wilmette, out into the world. And the spell line is about this wide, and it's like a burned track on the ground. And so Khan is following that line, and he's going to find his locus magicalicus, he thinks. So he sets off, and he goes out of Wilmette, and he's on his own at first, but then he's joined by Rowan, his friend, and by Argent. You guys remember Argent? Yeah. Who doesn't like Khan very much? Right, so Argent is there too. So they get pretty far out there and they run out of supplies. So Rowan's going to go to this city called Torrent to get supplies. And Argent and Khan are left in this clearing right next to the spell line. And the spell line is calling to Khan. He wants to follow it, but he has to wait with Argent. And so Rowan goes off to buy supplies and leaves Khan. Well, Argent gets fed up with Khan pretty quickly and ties him to a tree, right? Ties his arms behind the tree and leaves to go catch up with Rowan. So there's Khan alone in this clearing. There are 3 birds there, those Wilmette birds that tend to follow Khan around. They're there. And his horse is there. He calls him Mud Brown. Khan doesn't like his horse very much. And he falls asleep tied to the tree. So this is where this part of the scene takes up. I woke up hearing the cackle-crackle of the birds across from my tree. They muttered to each other and hunched into their wings, looking at the sky. The sun shone orangey gold through the trees. Late afternoon. Rowan would be back soon, wouldn't she? My arms were getting stiff. The birds' chattering grew louder. The horse lifted its head and snorted. In the distance, I heard a deep rumble hum, and then a grating shriek raced up the spell line toward me. I was halfway to my feet when the shriek slammed into me and echoed around in my skull, making my teeth hurt. I slid back to the ground. A swift black shadow passed over the clearing. Quick, I shook the shriek out of my head and looked at the sky to see what it was. Nothing, just a late afternoon sky. Was it a cloud? No, no cloud moves that fast. I pressed my back against the pine tree. Across the clearing, the horse snorted again and lifted its head, looking around with wide eyes. The birds had disappeared. Everything was silent and still. From the direction of the road came the sound of clopping hooves. After a moment, Rowan rode into the clearing. Seeing me tied to the tree, she shook her head. She got down from her horse and tied it next to Mud Brown, then headed over to me and my tree. Argent told me what he did, she said, taking off her gloves. He thought it was funny. I sent him on to get supplies. I suppose I should have expected it. Never mind stupid Argent. Did you see it? I asked, staring up at the sky. Rowan frowned. See what? She asked. She pulled her sword from its sheath to cut the ropes tying me, I figured. The spell line hummed again, making me squeeze my eyes shut and hunch my head into my shoulders. When I opened my eyes, something huge and winged, blazing with flames and heat, hurtled across the sky. Then it turned. Down it swooped, coming for me. It roared down over the forest, snapping off the tops of the pine trees as it flew, banking on huge golden wings. With a crash that shook the ground, it landed in the middle of the road. Its 4 taloned feet gouged deep ruts into the dirt. I knew what it was. Neverede told me they were extinct, but I'd seen pictures. Dragon. It was as if the sun had fallen down from the sky. The spell line keened a high song. The dragon was as big as a house, with red gold liquid-looking scales covering its broad back and muscled legs and tail, smoothing out over its chest and belly. Its head was mostly muzzle and long teeth. It had horns and a spiked crest that ran in a double row down its back to the end of its tail, which ended in a bristle of spikes. The dragon folded its golden wings and turned its head, glaring around the clearing with flame-bright eyes. Across from me, Mud Brown the horse was jerking its tether and making a high whinnying sound like screaming. So was Rowan's gray horse. The dragon cocked its head to look closer, and Mud Brown shrieked and tore loose its reins, then galloped off into the woods, followed by Rowan's horse, its tail flying like a flag. The dragon let them go. "Con, is that a dragon?" Rowan whispered. She stood 10 paces away from me, gripping her sword, her face white, her eyes wide. Trying to move slowly, I got to my feet. If the dragon wanted to eat me, I couldn't do anything about it, not with my hands tied behind the tree, not with them free either, and my sword in my hand. As soon as I moved, the dragon's big head swiveled around and it stared at me, moving closer. I stared back. The dragon's eyes were the deep red gold of embers in a banked fire. It shifted to the side, its scaled tail sliding over the ground, and raised one of its taloned feet, then brought it toward me. The talon was a sharp knife. Closing my eyes, I pressed myself against the tree, then felt the heat of the talon getting closer. "No!" Rowan shouted. My eyes popped open again. Rowan leaped between me and the dragon, her sword drawn. Her hair had come loose and floated around her head like long, flickering flames. With a quick silver flash, her sword leaped out and hacked at the dragon's talon. The dragon loomed over her. Rowan jumped back closer to me and raised her sword again. "Leave him!" she shouted. The dragon shifted, then its claw came swooping down to brush her out of the way. Rowan leaped aside, her sword slashing. The blade cut through the dragon's scales, but they healed up again like water flowing over the wound. She whirled and slashed again. The claw drew back. Rowan watched it, breathing hard, her sword ready. The dragon shifted. I saw it bringing round its tail. "Ro, look out!" I shouted. Too late. The dragon's tail slithered from behind, knocking Rowan to the ground, then pinning her there, lying across her chest like a log. Her sword lay a pace away from her hand. She stretched her arm, reaching for the sword. "Con," she gasped. "Stay still. Don't draw its attention to you." But the dragon swung its head back to me and raised its claw. It brought the talon forward again. My heart pounded so hard it was making my whole body shake. The talon went past my face and round behind me. A quick slice and it had cut the ropes tying my hands. I fell forward on my knees onto the pine-needly ground. I looked up and the dragon was standing over me, its front legs like 2 pillars on either side. Before I could scramble away, the dragon lifted a claw and knocked me over onto my back, then lowered the claw. One of its talons gouged into the ground next to my neck. The other went through the shoulder of my coat and sweater. I squirmed to try and get away, and the dragon leaned forward, pressing me into the ground. "All right," I gasped. "I'll keep still." With its other taloned foot, the dragon poked at me, first at my feet, then my shoulder, pushing aside my coat and pulling down the neck of my sweater with a sharp talon tip. "Con, what does it want?" Rowan asked, from where she lay under the tail. It was looking for something. Oh, I was a wizard. Was looking for my locus magicalicus. "I don't have one," I said softly. At the sound of my voice, the dragon's head reared back. The talons closed around me, snatching me up, gouging chunks of dirt from the ground. With a thunderclap of wings, the dragon leaped into the air. "Con!" Rowan screamed. I felt the lurch of the ground pulling at me and a wild rushing of wind. The dragon beat its wings again, an echoing whoomph. The land let me go, and we whirled upward. Away we flew, straight toward the dazzling sun. Woo! Yay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So that's the first encounter with a dragon that Con has. But there, as I said, there are more dragons in this book. There's a dragon as big as the top of a mountain waiting for him, and also the dragon as tiny as a little kitten, but as I said, more fierce. So you guys have been listening. We're doing really well here, and you guys have been listening really well. So I wanted to see if we could pause. And I have more stuff that I want to talk about, but I want to make sure you guys have time to get the questions answered that you need. And before I start answering questions, I'm going to change into my first dragon outfit. So think of your questions. I'll be right back. I'm going to put on my beautiful question answering dragon robe here. Yeah, pretty nice, huh? Okay. Repin this. Okay. Now, who has questions? My own son is raising his hand over here. I don't even know if I want to know what question it's going to be. Okay, go ahead, Theo.
Are those Bennett's biscuits anyway?
Are those Bennett's biscuits, he wants to know. Yeah, well, one of the things you get after this, if you stick around long enough, is there are biscuits to eat after it. Con eats biscuits with jam and cheese on them. And this kid of mine actually has tried that. He says it's good. It says it tastes like cheesecake. But those are not Bennett's biscuits. They're from a can, I hear. Sorry, Andrea. I'm running her out. Okay, who else has questions? I'm going to go way, way in the back. Go ahead. What's your question? Is this the last book in the series, she wants to know? Well, this is the third book in the trilogy. However, I have written another Magic Thief book, and it will probably be published at some time in the next couple of years. My next book, though, is not a Magic Thief book. It just went into my editor, and it's a totally new and different story. It actually starts in Iowa, too. But it's still magic. It's still fantasy and stuff. Magic does happen in Iowa, too. So, yeah. Okay, next question. Let's see. Let's go with Bree. Go ahead.
Does Bennett have a family?
Does Bennett have a family? Bree, who's wearing a dragon shirt for this occasion, wants to know. Yeah, Bennett does have a family. He has an old mother living somewhere in the Twilight. She doesn't approve of him, though, because he's a tough guy, you know. She doesn't approve of bodyguards and people like that. Bennett also has a girlfriend. Yeah, he knits her tea cozies. He's very. She has a tea shop. So yeah, these characters do have other histories. So okay, next question. How about the person in the tie-dye shirt right there? What inspired me to write this series? A couple of different things. One of the things is sitting right there. Well, the thing about babies are awesome, right? They cry at awkward times. But they're also really boring. Did you guys know that about babies? Yeah, babies are boring. And except for the ones who, are interesting. Sorry. But when Theo was a baby, I was bored. We were living in Germany, and I was really bored. And so I was inspired to start writing fantasy. So fantasy is really fun because it's full of magic and adventure and wizards and biscuits and good stuff like that. So partly what it inspired me was babies. Yeah. Okay, next question. Let's see. Go ahead.
Who's your favorite author?
Who is my favorite author? That's an easy one. I actually have one of his books back here. It's Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Have you guys read this? Who's read this book? People have read The Hobbit? Yes. I just finished reading The Lord of the Rings, the whole big, long book to Theo here. Yeah, The Hobbit's a really good one. So Tolkien is my favorite. And I think he's my favorite because he has all the best fantasy stuff, the wizards and the magic and the grand story, all that good stuff. Okay, next question. Let's see. How about Tony?
You said earlier you went to somebody's who's reading group.
Oh, whose reading group did I go to? Right over here. I went to Hannah's reading group right over here. Yeah. Which school do you go to again? Horn Elementary. There's a group of reading girls who are awesome, and I went to their reading group. So, yes. No, you can't ask any more questions. Go ahead. What's your question?
What's your favorite magical creature?
What's my favorite magical creature? Gee, I don't know. What it could possibly be. Yeah, pretty much the dragon is my favorite. Yeah, yours too? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
mine too.
Oh, I know everybody loves dragons. Okay, let's see. Naomi, I guess we'll have to let you ask a question.
Okay, so what is your book going to be called?
What is my
That's
book?
Iowa.
The book, what is the book going to be called that's set in Iowa? No, it's the next one after that. Well, a lot of times authors don't get to decide what their books are called. So I've been calling it The Crow Lady's Daughter, but my publisher tells me that will change. So who knows what it will be called, and who knows when it will be published in the next year and a half. So no, you can't ask any more questions. Okay, next question. Go ahead.
What got you inspired about dragons and all your dragon stuff?
What got me inspired in dragons? Here's why dragons are so awesome, I think, is because if you look at a dragon, right, it really should not be able to fly. I mean, look at the size of it and the size of its little wings. It should have like a giant keel bone to anchor the musculature that would power these wings, and yet dragons fly. And they fly because it's magic. So, and sort of fantasy works that way too. Like fantasy is just a book, but somehow it's also magic, and it takes you to another place. So dragons are kind of like the embodiment of fantasy to me. They're awesome. Awesome. I do have a reason for liking dragons. Okay, next question. Let's see. Let's go right over here. What's your question?
How can a dragon in your book live up to 500 years?
How can a dragon in my book live up to 500 years?
Like how much?
How long would it live? Thousands and thousands of years. Maybe even like 10 or 15 or 20,000 years. The dragons, if they keep growing and they're really huge, think about how old a dragon is if it's the size of the top of a mountain. I mean, really, really old. So, maybe 10 or 20 or 30,000 years old. Yeah, really old. Okay, next question. Let's see. How about in the flowery shirt over there? Yes. What's my favorite Magic Thief book? For me, I have like real short attention span. So it's like whatever the last book I've written is my favorite. So the third one is my favorite. But it's also my favorite because of the dragons. And I was totally saving the dragons as a treat to write for book 3. Did you all see my geek flag waving there for a minute? The dragons are awesome. Yeah. Okay, Dylan, bring it on.
Who or what's your favorite character in Magic Thief?
Who's my favorite character in The Magic Thief? Well, there was just a review of the third book from Kirkus, and they said Khan is the most deliciously like obnoxious character or something like that. And I was like, yeah, you should try writing him sometime. So yeah, Khan is totally my favorite, although really close second is Bennett, because he's the biscuit baker. Yeah. Okay, I think maybe time just for a couple more questions. Yeah, okay, pointing to the person over here. My least favorite character to write. Bad guys are really hard for me to write because you got to understand them. Like, you got to understand why they're doing what they're doing, and it's hard for me to think of good reasons for bad guys to do what they're doing. So, although I kind of like Crow, because Crow is really evil. So probably Jagus, the bad guy from the second book, although he has a kind of tangled history, too. He has a reason for being the way he is. So, yeah. Okay, maybe just a couple more questions to go way back in the back over here. Okay, how about in the brown shirt? Yes?
Can you say that you're writing another book after this? Is the main...
So the next book that comes out, as I said, the Crow book, totally different characters. But the next Magic Thief book is still Khan. Still Khan is the main character of that book. It's called Chimney Swifts. And yeah, definitely Khan is all over that one. It would be hard for me to imagine writing a book in Well-Met and not have it be about Khan. Really. Okay, let's see. Go back to the same group of girls over here, right next to her. Go ahead.
Why did you choose to write fantasy?
Why did I choose to write fantasy? Oh, because fantasy has all the best stuff in it. The magic and the peril. And in fantasy, too, you often have these big stakes at hand. It's good versus evil. It's big stuff. And I like writing about that kind of stuff. Okay, maybe just like two more questions. Go ahead.
Where is Rowan's dad?
Where is Rowan's dad? Oh, these awkward family questions. I have no idea where Rowan's dad is. And I don't know where Con's dad is either. I haven't figured that out yet. As a writer, I'm not a really big planner. I just kind of write and hope stuff works out. I haven't worked that out yet. But they may be out there somewhere. You already have one, Naomi. I'm not going to call on you again. Okay, one more. Last question. No. Wait, go ahead. Go ahead. You go.
Well, actually I had three. For the frog pot pie, I actually use frogs.
For the frog pot pie, do you actually use frogs? So in book 2, there are recipes in the back of the book, and there's a recipe for Bennett's chicken pot pie. And Con, while he's in the desert, gets a little desperate and sort of makes a joke about making frog pot pie. And I didn't do that recipe, if that's what you're asking. You probably could, especially if you lived in France. You might, because they eat frogs in France, right? No. Okay, good. So I may have some more time at the end for more questions. So hang on, and we'll get some more questions. I have a question for you guys now, though. So let me ask, who are your favorite dragons? In movies or in books, like what dragons can you think of, like famous favorite dragons?
The horn-tailed hornet, I think it's called, in the
Harry Potter dragons, yeah. What are some other ones? What, Hannah?
Zool from the Enchanted Forest Chronicles.
Enchanted Forest Chronicles. Is that a little one, too? No?
She's
Bigger? Okay. Yeah, what are some other ones? Go ahead. What's the big dragon?
Monstrous Nightmare and like one of the Hiccup.
And the Hiccup Horrendous Haddock books? Yeah, what are some other ones? Aragon dragon, Saphira, right? Yeah. Saphira, yeah. She's an awesome dragon.
The Spiderwick Chronicles.
They have a dragon in that too, in the Spiderwick Chronicles? Wow, okay, awesome. Well, you guys have some really good dragons. You guys with me? Okay, put your hands down, put your hands down. Pip, I know Pip, okay. So I wanted to tell you about some of my favorite dragons. One of my favorite dragons, oh wait, I have to do another costume change while I talk about dragons again. Hang on. Think about dragons for a second. These are my dragon wings. Okay. There, I'm ready to continue talking about dragons. All moms have dragon wings, says this mom up here. So, yeah, the Chinese dragon is an awesome kind of dragon. It's often very ancient and sort of sacred and fierce and mighty. Another really famous kind of dragon is the dragon from St. George and the Dragon, from an old story in England about a knight who slays a dragon. This dragon doesn't look tremendously fierce, but it's a pretty evil dragon. And this is a real famous picture of a dragon, you know, with the white horse and the knight stabbing the dragon. Go dragons! Okay. Not all dragons have to be mean and fierce, though, because some of them are awesome. Somebody mentioned the dragons in the Hiccup Horrendous Haddock books. The one in the movie is different from the one in the books, right? If you've read the books and seen the movies, they're different. But this is Toothless, the dragon, who is awesome and mighty, and yet toothless. Kind of reminds me of my dog a little bit. He does occasionally have teeth, it's true. Another famous dragon who's a nice dragon is the dragon in My Father's Dragon. Any of you guys read that book?
Love that book.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And, you know, obviously not tremendously fierce. But there are a lot of really fierce dragons out there. One of them, of course, is by my favorite author that I mentioned earlier, Tolkien. Yes. Smaug, the dragon, who has a hoard full of treasure and gold. Remember, Bilbo sneaks into its lair and steals some things from the dragon, from Smaug. And another dragon who is possibly my favorite dragon is the dragon from the story Beowulf. Now, I know that you guys, for the most part, do not know the story of Beowulf. It's an old, ancient English poem. And I brought it with me because I wanted to tell you about this dragon, because this is a mighty, awesome dragon. I'm going to read you some of the dragon's names, okay? Old harrower of the dark, slick-skinned dragon, scourge of the people, horde guardian, vile sky winger. Isn't that good? Vile sky winger. Boy, this is a serious dragon. Fire dragon, sky plague, skyborn foe, serpent, ground burner. So in the story of Beowulf, there's this dragon who set up a hoard. It's got a barrow full of gold and treasure. And the king, Beowulf, decides he has to go and slay this dragon to get rid of it because it's the ground burner and the skyborn foe. So Beowulf comes to slay the dragon. Beowulf comes in and he gives a shout.
You vile sky winger!
And he comes up to the dragon, and the dragon comes out, pouring forth in a hot battle fume. The breath of the monster burst from the rock. There's a rumble underground. And then Beowulf the warrior lifted his shield, and the dragon writhed and convulsed and turned on the king, whose keen-edged sword was already in his hand. And Beowulf strikes the dragon, but his sword bounces off the dragon's enameled scales. And then Beowulf tries again to strike the dragon, and this time his sword breaks and falls onto the ground. Then the bane of the people, the fiery-breathing dragon, was mad to attack for a third time. When a chance came, he caught the hero in a rush of flames and clamped sharp fangs into his neck. Beowulf's body ran red with blood, and he fell to the ground. But in a last strike, he struck the dragon and slew it. And thus, both the dragon and Beowulf were slain. Good job, guys. Good job, guys. Take a bow. Go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead. Bow. Good job. I just want you guys all to know that that's real chainmail that Beowulf is wearing. Real, actual chainmail, and it weighs about 30 pounds.
It's really heavy.
So that's the deal with Beowulf. But it's a great story. Beowulf is a great story. And it's the original, one of the first and most original dragon slaying stories of all, except that the king gets slain too by the dragon. So another thing in the Magic Thief, and I know you guys all have your Locus Magicalicus stone, is that you can do magic with your Locus Magicalicus. So I want everybody to get out your Locus Magicalicus. You all have your Locus Magicalicus? Okay, does anybody remember the spell that you use to do light? What is it? Lothphalos. If you say the word Lothphalos, the magic will hear you, and you can do magic. So I want to see if we can make it work. Okay? So let's try it. Okay? I'll count to 3, and we'll say Lothphalos. 1, 2, 3. Lothphalos. Let's try it again. That was not very good. Sorry. Okay. Count to 3, and this time we'll say it a little bit louder. 1, 2, 3. A little bit. Okay, a little bit came on. Okay, and now one last time. Oh, that time it definitely worked. Good job. You guys have good magic with your stuff there. Oh, alas, we're doomed to darkness. I think you better say it one more time. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Wow, gosh, you guys are good. So we're just about at the end of our time here. I think maybe time for a couple more questions, maybe just a few more, and then I'm going to sign books if you got them too. So I want to have plenty of times for that. So a couple more questions. Go ahead. If you've already asked a question, put your hand down. Okay.
Will the magic ever die?
Okay. This is a really, really good question. You guys ready? He wants to know, will the magic ever die? That's a really good question. Now, do you guys remember what Khan believes about the magic?
Yeah.
What does Khan believe about the magic? What does he think? That it's a living being, right? So you assume that something alive could also die. You'll have to actually wait to book 3 and find out the answer to that question. I'm not going to tell you the answer, but it's a really good question, and it's one that sort of perplexed me a little bit. Okay, I think maybe just one more question, because the natives are getting restless. Go ahead. Yes?
How did you think of the characters?
Oh, boy. Her question is, how did you think of the characters? Did I mention before that I'm a writer who doesn't plan anything out? Yeah, so the characters all just kind of come to me. I didn't really think of them. They just kind of grow on me a little bit. So I think we're gonna wind it up, but I want to say a couple of really, really, really big thank yous. First of all, big thanks to all the babies in the world, because babies are awesome. Yay, babies! A big thanks to everybody. Should say a big, giant thank you to Azul, which is the rock shop in the Amanas, who gave everybody a free Locus Magicalicus today. So for all your Locus Magicalicus needs, you should go to Azul in the Amana colonies. I'm telling you, woohoo! Thank you to them. Another big thank you to the good people at Iowa Book who are out there. Hi guys, they're waving. Especially Shauna and Skip out there, because they brought huge boxes of books over here. For this. Big thanks to the Iowa City Public Library, especially to Andrea, who made the biscuits. Yay! And last thank you to the person who made those dragon costumes, which are, you have to admit, really awesome. So